morning and welcome to Calvary Church. We're so glad to have you with us today. Let's stand this morning and start off by worshiping our King together.
Stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder, who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace.
Thanks for singing. You may have a seat.
Well, Monica, thank you so much, and team for leading us this morning, getting our service off to a wonderful, wonderful start with a great time of worship together. My name is Bo Eckert. I'm the senior pastor here at Calvary Church, and I'm really excited about our time together as we gather as a family here at Calvary Church. I look forward to finishing up our 10 Commandments series, Freedom Rules, and we're going to do some more singing in just a moment and some different times of prayer. But here at the beginning of the service, we just have some family time. We need to to give you a couple updates on some things. And to get that family time started, we have a family dedication planned this morning. We do this from time to time with some of our young families in the church. So at this time, I'm going to invite these young families to come up and to join me here on the platform. And as they're coming, I want to encourage all of you to reach into your bulletins now and pull out the family dedication insert. This is something a little bit different that we haven't done before. But if you reach in there and you see that, you'll see the pictures of the 5 children that are being dedicated here this morning. You also see on the other side of that insert all the children that were dedicated at the 9:15 service. So we hope that particularly for those of you that know these families, that this will be a great opportunity for you to take this with you and to continue to pray for them. Part of our desire here as the family of Calvary Church is that all of us would be partnering with our families as they raise their children. So what we're doing here today is not to be equated with infant baptism. This is a child dedication, but really it's even more of a family dedication. These families are a part of Calvary Church. They've gone through some training and some equipping times where they've committed to the ways that they want to raise their children. And so this is a time where they're really coming publicly to declare what they've already done privately. And it's an opportunity for us to see them, to pray for them, to connect with them as we're one large family here at Calvary. So I'm going to ask all of you guys to step up to the middle of the road. I know we're not supposed to be in the middle of the road, but I want you to come to the middle of the road. So what we have here today, this is Paul and Rachel, and they're bringing little William. This is their first. I had the privilege of officiating and marrying Paul and Rachel, and now to be a part of their family, their child dedication. So it's good to see you today, buddy. David and Joanna are bringing Anya and Jana. Is that right? Yes. Got that right. So it's good to see you girls today and excited that you can be a part of this. Kyle and Megan are bringing little Graham. Now, Graham has 3 big sisters, Natalie, Carolyn, and Savannah. So we need to pray an extra bit of blessing on Graham this morning as he grows up with these 3 big sisters. And then finally, Clint and Aaron are bringing Chase. Chase has a big sister named Kara. Hey, buddy, how are you? Look at that smile. Did you guys see that? It's pretty good, huh? All of these families that are coming, for those that have other children, all of their children have been a part and been dedicated here at Calvary Church as well. So what a great privilege and opportunity this is. I'm going to pray for these families, pray for these children. And as I do, I'm actually going to invite a few other staff members to come and join me for this prayer time. Mark Canada is going to come. He's part of our student ministry. Anna Philgrove is coming, part of our children's ministry. And Patty Gerke is coming, and she's a part of our adult ministry. And the reason I've asked them to come is somewhat of a symbolic way of saying, you've heard us say over and over again, with these families, we want to partner with them as they're raising their children, but we don't want to partner with them just throughout children's ministry. We want to partner with them the whole way through. So to have a staff member up here that's representing children's ministry and student ministry and adult ministry, it's just a way of saying, hey, we're here with you, we're on board, we're excited about what God's doing in your life and the life of your family. So they're going to join me as we pray together. So let's bow, let's pray together. Father, these children are a precious gift from you. And it's a privilege for us as a church family to partner with these families as they raise them in a God-honoring way. And Father, as I now pray specifically for each of them, I know it is Paul and Rachel's desire that you would be the center of their lives and family. I ask for your guidance for them in their parenting. May they as parents model your love in such a way that Will may come to know, love, and serve you. And Father, I also pray this morning for David and Joanna as they dedicate Jana and Anya to you today. Please give them as parents your grace to raise them for your glory. May these precious little girls follow you all the days of their life. Father, I pray for Kyle and for Megan, that you work in them so that Graham sees Christ in their lives and is drawn to you. Help him to understand how you have uniquely created him so that they can encourage him to use his gifts and abilities to shine bright for your honor and glory. And finally, Father, I pray for Clint and Aaron. May they provide Chase with the love, knowledge, and support that he needs. I pray for guidance and wisdom for them to raise him so that he will live a faithful life, knowing the word of the Lord and always keeping you in his heart. What a tremendous, tremendous privilege and stewardship each of these parents has in raising their children. May we as a church encourage, help, support, and partner with them as you give all of us the grace and the love and the wisdom that can only come from you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys. You can head on down there. It could be that, yeah, absolutely. It could be that some of you are here as family members to support the families that are going through the family dedication today, and it could be your first time at Calvary Church. Or it could be your first time at Calvary Church and you didn't even know that that was happening. You just came to church here this morning, and we hope and trust that you have been warmly welcomed. And we would love to be able to connect with you on an individual basis. It's difficult to do it in this environment, but we've created an environment where it can happen, and we call that our welcome gathering. Immediately following this service, if you go out the auditorium doors, take a right, head down to the end of the lobby, you'll see a sign there that says Welcome Gathering. It's a great way for you to get to know a little bit more about Calvary Church, for you to get some questions answered about Calvary Church. It's one of the ways that we help this big church to feel a little bit more like a family. It'll take no more than 10 minutes of your time. Would love to be able to connect with you there. Whether it's your first time here, or you've been here a few times and you've got some questions about Calvary Church, would love for you to join us at the Welcome Gathering today. As always, right after this service, lunch is served in Fellowship Hall. So if you're sticking around after the service, love for you to be able to connect with one another and enjoy some time of fellowship there with one another. Now at this time, I'm going to invite our ushers to come forward. We're going to receive our morning offering as I share a few other family matters with you this morning. And as they come, I just want to again thank all of you for your faithful and consistent giving to Calvary Church. It helps us to do what God has called us to do as a local church. Many of you love what's happening here, and the resources that God provides through you is the way that we can continue to fulfill the mission and the vision of God's local church here at Calvary. So we're so thankful for that. We're coming up on the middle of June. At the end of June, our fiscal year, Calvary Church's fiscal year, comes to an end. So over these next couple weeks, would really love to end the year on a good, strong up note. This has been a tremendous year of giving at Calvary Church. Thank you for your faithful generosity. And for those of you that may be considering it, we're just looking to finish the year strong. So any even additional gifts above and beyond to help us finish this fiscal year strong would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Now, another thing to let you know that's happening here in the life of the church. This summer's a time that we often send out many short-term mission teams. And over the next couple weeks, we're going to be letting you know about some of the teams that are going out so that we can be praying for them and supporting them. Next weekend, a group of 24 people from Calvary Church will be headed up to the Johnny and Friends camp. This is a camp that really serves and supports families that has a member that has special needs. Calvary's been sending teams to this camp for many, many years. It's a great encouragement to the family member that has special needs, but it's also a great blessing to the rest of the family as well. And they always come back with not just wonderful stories of ways that they were able to bless others, but they come back with stories of the way that they have been blessed as well. So as they leave next weekend, we want to be praying for them, encouraging them, and we look forward to hearing back as to how those 24 individuals from Calvary Church and the experience that they had on the trip. Now at this time, I want to give you some staffing updates here at Calvary Church. Ben and Allison Bixby have been here. Ben's been on staff with us for about 5 years, serving mainly in our C4 ministry, which is our college and our young adult ministry. He's worn a couple different hats, but that's the main area that he has been serving. And Ben and Allison are going to be making a transition off of staff, and they're going to be headed back to South Carolina. So Ben is here this morning and going to come up and join me on the platform. Ben, we have so appreciated your faithful ministry over these last 5 years and the opportunity to get to know you and Allison and the kids. And as you make this transition, it's kind of happening for several different reasons. One is family related. And tell us a little bit more about the transition that you guys are making.
Yeah, I think for the last couple of years, as our family has gone from 1 to 2 to 3, we've just been asking, where do we want to raise our kids? And while we love you, The answer has just resounded over the last few years. We'd rather raise them near family.
Yeah.
We'd like to be within driving distance of Grammy and Boompa.
Grammy and Boompa.
Right.
So you guys love Grammy and Boompa more than you love the people of Calvary Church.
You know,
it's understandable. It's understandable.
a toss-up.
It's a toss-up.
Some days, but most of the time, we choose them, frankly.
Yeah. Ben, you have served so faithfully. We talked this week as a staff, and staff affirmed Ben's, ability to teach, the individual connection he's made with people here on the staff and the people of Calvary Church. I talked about his pastoral care and the gifts that he has in those areas, and I look forward to seeing the ways that they will continue to shine forth in the way that God will continue to use them. But you also have a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, honestly, the future is a little bit fuzzy. Not quite sure exactly what the next 6 months looks like. I think over the last few years, God has really been working into me a desire to impact the marketplace with ministry. Yeah. And so we're just trusting Him with a little bit of a freelancing, business building experience in the next couple of months to say, how can we make the best impact on His kingdom in the place where He's put us?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to pray for this transition, but literally the transition is happening today.
Right after lunch. We're probably 2 hours out.
The truck is packed.
Literally.
Parked here at Calvary Church. You're going to drive the moving truck. Allison and the kids are going to get in the van, and
unfortunately,
you're going to head south.
It's I still need a moving buddy.
Okay, so you're going to be driving the truck alone. If somebody wants to drive with you,
buy their airfare back.
Buy a one-way flight home.
Maybe providentially they have a friend down there that misses Lancaster County and needs to bring them back up here afterwards. I don't know.
Okay, we'll see how God works all that out in the next 10 minutes.
I would pay for their meals and hotel. It'd be a blast.
Okay. Ben and Allison, as they said, they're going to be down front here afterwards. They're going to eat lunch with us in Fellowship Hall, and then off they go. So if you want to connect with them afterwards or even have lunch with them and say some goodbyes, you certainly have the opportunity to do that. But I love the privilege now to be able to pray for you guys during this time. So let's pray together. Father in heaven, I give you thanks this morning for the Bixby family. Thank you for their partnership in the gospel from their very first day at Calvary Church until now. And I am sure of this, that the work that you have begun in their life and their family and their ministry will be faithfully brought to completion by you at the day of Jesus Christ. Thank you for how you have used Ben and Allison to impact the lives of so many. I pray specifically for their trip south today. Protect them, encourage them, and provide for their every need. And I pray for each of the children, for Reed and Luke and Ansley. I pray that you would provide for each of them for their specific needs at each of their stages of life throughout this transition and beyond. Father, you have been faithful, you are faithful, and you will continue to be faithful to them. And for that, we give you thanks. I pray that you would continue to use them in the lives of others to bring you the most amount of honor and glory that is due your name. And I pray all this in the wonderful and matchless name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Thanks, Ben. It's sad to say goodbye to a beloved family, and some of you then now might be wondering, you know that Ben has worked mainly in the area of our C4 ministry, our college, our young adult ministry, but mainly that C4 area, which mainly meets on Tuesday night. And you say, well, what's happening next in that area? So let me give you a couple other staff updates. Mark Canada, who is our team leader for our student ministry area. Mark is going to now oversee and provide leadership for this C4 ministry, for that college and young adult ministry that meets Tuesday nights and also connects on Sunday morning. Mark's going to provide the leadership there, even as he continues to be the team leader for student ministry. But there's another transition that we're real excited about in student ministry, and that's with Michael Gilchrist. Michael Gilchrist has served faithfully for the last number of years as student ministry, pastor of one of the pastors in student ministry, and particularly in our junior high area. Michael is not leaving staff, so hear that loud and clear. He's not leaving staff. He's just making an internal transition. Michael's now going to be part of our global ministry team. Our value related to global ministry says we're going into God's world by extending the gospel to others right here and around the globe. And we strive and do both of those, but much of our effort has been on the around the globe side of it. As Michael moves into the global ministry area, he's going to focus in on community impact, local outreach, evangelism, not for him to do it on his own, but for him to come and equip the people of Calvary Church so that we can extend and even have a greater impact than we're already having on what's happening locally. I think it's a very strategic move. I think it fits very well with his giftedness and his makeup, and I'm excited to see what this is going to mean for him, but also for the people and the ministry of Calvary Church. So what that does is that leaves us with an opportunity to bring in a new staff member in our student ministry team, and that person's going to be Drew Williams. Drew has grown up here at Calvary Church. He went off to Columbia International University where he did his schooling. He stayed in the South for a couple years and taught at a Christian school, came back to the area, has been serving in another local church in the area of student ministry, and he will now be joining our student ministry team, focusing in that junior high area. So Drew will join the staff here at Calvary Church a little bit later this summer, sometime in August. Michael's transition probably won't take place until sometime in the fall or even late fall. So they'll have some overlap, and we look forward to that smooth transition there. So I'm really excited about what's happening at Calvary Church. There's some excitement, there's some energy. God is changing lives. These staff transitions, I think, is only going to help to further and to push the ministry forward. So thank you for your faithful prayers. Thank you for your service, the volunteering, for all the involvement that you have, for your giving. It's helping to make Calvary Church who it is, and we're just thankful for what God is doing. More details on these transitions to come a little bit later in the summer, but we wanted to keep you in the loop as to what's going on. So, okay, let's take a breath. There was a lot of family updates that I just gave there, but we consider ourselves a family here at Calvary Church, and sometimes you just got to take the time to do that so that all of you can be informed about what's happening and that you can join us in praying about what's happening. But at this time, we want to transition back into worshiping the Lord through song. We've been in this Freedom Rules series. These next two songs that we're going to sing focus in on the way that it talks about being free, about how God makes us free and how we're free in Christ. And you'll see that theme run throughout these next two songs as we prepare for this morning's message and as we worship the Lord together. So let's stand, let's rise to our feet. Allow me to pray to focus us back in, and then we're going to worship the Lord together. Father, thank you for what you're doing in and through Calvary Church. There's excitement, there's energy, there's life change, and it's not because what we're drumming up and what we're producing, but because it's the work that you're doing. This is your church, it's your ministry. You call us co-laborers. We submit to your leadership. Continue to pray for Ben and Allison as they transition. We pray for these other staff transitions that will take place. But we're excited about what you're doing and what's happening here at Calvary Church. We're excited that we can come together. We're excited that we can worship you through song. And as we do that now, may you help us to see the freedom that we have because of what you have done in and through the Lord Jesus Christ. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Our God is a consuming fire, a burning holy flame with glory and freedom. Our God is the only righteous judge, ruling over us with kindness and wisdom, and we will keep our eyes on you. kingdom is unshakable. With you forever we will reign. Our God is jealous for his own. None could comprehend his love and his mercy. Our God is exalted on his throne, high above the heavens. Forever he's worthy. We will keep our eyes on you. We will keep our eyes on you. A mighty fortress is our God. A sacred refuge is your name. Your kingdom is unshakable. With you forever we will reign. We will keep our eyes on you. We will keep our eyes on you, so we can set our hearts on you. Lord, we will set our hearts on you. A mighty fortress is our God. A sacred refuge is your name. Your kingdom is unshakable. With you forever we will reign. A mighty fortress is our God. A sacred refuge is your name. Your kingdom is unshakable. With you forever we will reign. With you forever we will reign. With you forever we will reign. Our God is a consuming fire, a burning holy flame with glory and freedom. Alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope and no place to begin. Your love made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested and my life began, ash was redeemed, only beauty remains. My orphan heart was given a name. My mourning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You I'm a prisoner no more. My shame was a ransom he faithfully bore. He canceled my debt and he called me his friend. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Oh, yes it does. Our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoices though heaven had lost. But when Jesus arose with our freedom in hand, that's when death was arrested and our life began. That's when death was arrested and our life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and our life began. Yes, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and our life began. When death was arrested and our life began. Yes, when death was arrested and our life began.
Amen. You may have a seat.
Because of what Jesus accomplished for us on the cross, death was arrested, our life then began, and freedom rules. As we begin this final message, you say, where's the roll-in? I wanted to see the video one last time. We intentionally didn't want to do the roll-in today because I actually wanted you to see these guys bringing the road out and assembling it and put it together. They've got it down now that they can do it in about 35 to 40 seconds or so. And we counted it up this week. It took over 24 individual people that contributed to the road and the signs and the imagery, and every week bringing it out and sometimes taking it away again. And I'm just so thankful for our creative team, for the work that's done behind the scenes. Amen. And it's just a way, you know, I recognize and I thank them, but it takes so many of you that do so many things for Calvary Church behind the scenes that people don't see to make us who we are as this local body of believers. So thank you for all of you that serve. There's some of you as we go into this summer and even look ahead to the fall. you say, yeah, I really need to get on board with that, and I want to find a role where I can contribute and be a part of what's happening, and would love for you to be able to connect with us and have that conversation on a deeper level. So you say, why do we do this? Why do we have the signs and the images and all of those things? Our desire is that in preaching of God's word, that you would be able to walk out of the room and remember what was taught and remember what was talked about. And since our brains are more of image processors than they are word processors, the images help to do that. They help us to point to and be reminded of what was taught. And you look at the way that the Lord Jesus taught. He taught us spiritual truth with the use of physical objects. Sheep and shepherds and coins and seeds and soils and the birds of the air and the lilies of the field all were pointed to by Jesus to teach what he wanted us to teach. And isn't it interesting, and sometimes we don't even stop and think about this, that Jesus took a piece of bread and he took a glass of wine, a cup of juice, and he said, I want you to take this physical object that you can touch, that you can smell, that you can taste, that you can see, and I want it to be a reminder to you of my death. And I want you to proclaim my death until I come. He gave us physical objects and images to be reminded of the truth that he wants us to know and to remember. So during this series, we've talked about freedom rules. I'm going to talk about the signs, and just for a moment, we've had this road, and the road is kind of symbolized that a car is most free when it's on the road, and we are most free when we're following God's rules and commandments that he has set up for us. So the other thing that we want to do in helping you to remember is not just have these visuals here present, but we want to send something with you as you go. So as often we do at the end of a series, we give you something to take with you. So last week, many of you that were here, you got your Freedom Rules keychain. You got your set of 10 cards that has all the signs and the titles of the message. On the back of those cards are the actual 10 commandments. If you weren't here last week, on your way out, you can go to the overlook area in the center of the lobby, and there's extra keychains and cards there. For any of you, but particularly for parents, there's actually extra sets of the 10 cards detached from the keychain. If you want to take an extra set of cards, some parents have come back to us and say, hey, I'd love an extra set. I can make a matching game for my kids, or I can use them in this creative way. So we have extra of those cards. Take an extra pack or two with you, and hopefully it can be a great reminder and a great tool for you as you remember and you reflect back on this series. So for the last time, at least for a little while, open with me to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20 in the Pew Bible that's in front of you. It's found on page 61. And as we get into the final freedom rule, let's just, again, look back and be reminded of where we've come from. Let's understand the context of the 10 Commandments so that we're thinking about them properly as we go from here. God has just brought the Israelites out of slavery, out of Egypt, out of 400 years of being enslaved by the Egyptians. And he gets them out, and they're out in the wilderness, and he comes to them and he says this in Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. He says, I am the Lord your God. And as we've said, you wonder if they said, wait a minute, God, don't you mean you are the Lord, the God? How can you say that you're our God? How can we be yours? We haven't even done anything yet. God, isn't it the way that it works is you give us rules to follow, and if we follow those rules, then we'll be yours. Then we'll belong to you. Don't we have to keep the rules first? And God says, no, you're already mine. I've shown you that you're already mine because I've rescued you and brought you out of Egypt. And the rules that I'm giving are not a condition for a relationship with me. The rules that I'm giving are a confirmation of the relationship that we already have. If you just remember that and nothing else from the series, that would be profound enough. God's rules, God's commandments are not a condition for relationship. They are a confirmation of a relationship. God has brought them out of Egypt. Notice at the end of verse 2, out of the house of slavery. And if he's bringing them out of slavery, what's he bringing them into? He's bringing them into freedom. And the rules that he is about to give them are freedom rules. These rules and these commandments are not meant to make them good. The laws can't make us good. The rules are given, the commandments are given to keep free people free. So as we get into number 10, let's review the other 9. The signs have helped us to remember them, so I hope as you drive around town and drive around the county, as you see these signs, maybe you'll connect it back to the series. Maybe you'll even be able to connect it back to the specific message. But God comes in verse 3, and here's the first freedom rule. He says, "You shall have no other gods before me." Put God first. When it comes to a relationship with God, it is a one-way street. This was revolutionary for them. They came out of a culture, and all of the cultures that were surrounding them at that time, you had lots and lots of gods. You had gods for all sorts of different things. And God says, no, you shall have no other gods besides me. It's a one-way street when it comes to your relationship with me. No other gods, just me. That's what starts it all. Put me first. Then he says, you shall not make for yourself a carved image. Again, would have been a revolutionary thought for them. If you had a pagan god, you had an idol that didn't just represent that god, but it was as if the god embodied that idol. Different than having an image like we have here that points us to spiritual truth. Those idols kind of represented that God, and they fed those idols and bathed the idols and took care of those idols. For what purpose? To try to keep those gods happy, to try to actually manipulate those gods. And God says, no, don't try to scale me down. Don't try to compartmentalize me. Don't try to make me manageable. Then, freedom rule number 3, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. This is much more than just saying curse words. Because sometimes that's what we think when we think about this commandment. No, this is upholding God's reputation. Don't assign or attribute God's name to something that he didn't say. You want to uphold God's reputation, uphold his name. In the same way that we want to keep Pennsylvania beautiful, we want to keep God beautiful. We want to honor his reputation. Freedom rule number 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. This was a great message for some of you to go back and listen to again, because this can be a challenging one. You know, do we keep the Sabbath today? Do we not keep the Sabbath today? We explored and we really understand what it means to enter God's rest. That God's rest is his completed work, the work that he has done for us. And we don't just enter God's Sabbath rest on one day of the week. It should be entering God's Sabbath rest every single moment of every single day. And for those of you that missed that message, we finally answered the question once and for all of whether or not it's okay to mow on Sunday. So if you're still struggling with that, go ahead and listen to that message. That'll clear it up for you. Number 5, honor your father and mother. Honor God's authority. Yield to the authority that God has put in place. This commandment's a little bit of a transition commandment. You say, does it go with the first 4? Does it go with the second half? Some people divide the commandments 4 and 6. We actually, chose to put them with the first 5. Honor God's authority. And then as we get into 6 through 9, I'm going to go through these just very quickly and then make a comment at the end. You shall not murder. End your hate. You shall not commit adultery. Channel your desires. You shall not steal. Manage your stuff. And you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Watch your words. The reason I kind of lump all of those together is because those are very external commandments. You can see whether people are following or keeping those commandments or not. But as we explored in each of those messages, we say, no, it's not just about the external conformity. God is concerned about what's going on in your heart. And we dug down over these last couple of weeks to a real heart level to see what's really happening and what's going on there on the inside. So before we get into number 10, I would break down the first 9 this way. That the first 5 fall under this heading of honor God, and the next 4 fall under that heading of honor others. Honoring God, honoring others. If we're honoring God and we're putting God first, we're only naturally going to honor others. So that's how I kind of break down the first 9. But you say, what do you do with number 10? Personally, this is not inspired, but personally, I put number 10 in its own category, and we just called it guard your heart. And the commandment is, you shall not covet. You shall not covet. And what we said here is this is a matter of what's going on in your heart. And you want to guard your heart. You want to make sure that your heart is buckled up. Because out of the heart is where the rest of these flow, particularly 6 through 10. If I've got stuff going on in my heart, that's when it leads to murder. That's when it leads to stealing. That's when it leads to lying. I want to guard my heart of covetousness and coveting and strongly desiring what somebody else has, because then it leads to those external and outward actions and behaviors that you can see. But this concept of coveting is a challenging one to get at, because as I said, many of these other ones are very visible. You can see whether somebody's doing it or not. You can't really see this one. I can call the cops and say, hey, I just witnessed a murder, or somebody just stole my belongings. I can't call the cops and say, yes, officer, my neighbor has been staring at my new car for a long time. And I actually think he has moved from admiring it to coveting it. Can you send a unit over here right away? You can't do that. Why? Because it's unenforceable. It's invisible. You can't see what's going on in people's hearts. All of us have had the experience of something happening to somebody else. They get a gift, they get a new car, a new house, a new job, a promotion, or whatever it is. And on the outside, we might be saying, I'm so happy for you. And on the inside, it's just eating us up inside because we wish it would be happening to us. You can't see covetousness. And so I don't think it's a surprise that God puts it at the last of the commandments. There's part of me that says maybe it should have been, up near the beginning, because if we're guarding our heart, the rest kind of takes care of itself. But I think it's a great reminder at the end to come and to be guarding our heart. If God was just concerned with external conformity, he wouldn't have added this one to the list, because this truly does get at the heart issues. So let's actually look at the full commandment together. Verse 17 says this. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. Pretty practical. You can understand what that means. Some of us, maybe we don't struggle with coveting somebody else's house, but what we may struggle with is not being content with our own. Now, I'm not talking about the endless honey-do lists, and you do want to do a good job of being a good steward of your home and keeping up the property and all of that. But some of you feel like the home that you're living in is just never right. And there can be covetousness that is born out of that. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Is it ever tempting? Now, again, we wouldn't say it out loud, but in our hearts that we would kind of look at our spouse and say, why can't you be a little bit more like him? Or why can't you just be a little bit more like her? Or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox. Do any of you struggle with coveting your neighbor's ox? Some of you might live next to a farm and there's some good hefty oxes there, and you say, I covet that ox all the time. Now, in that context, what did the ox do? The ox helped to get their work done. So in our application today, it might be, do you covet your neighbor's yard tools? Maybe even their mower. I like my mower. I don't struggle with coveting my neighbor's mower. And I have to be careful of telling stories about my neighborhood because there's a lot of people from Calvary Church that live in my neighborhood. So I do this with a bit of trepidation, but just to be vulnerable a little bit. Here's where I can struggle. And some of you guys, you know what this is about. I covet the edging along the front lawn of my neighbor's house. How does he get it so straight? You know, the edge that goes right up to the sidewalk or right up to the street, or the edges along, his driveway and around the beds. Man, that is good stuff. Now, I don't say that because I want somebody to come to my house and edge stuff. Don't come over and start edging things at my house. I'm just saying if we're not careful, we can look into the neighbor's yard and the neighbor's lawn and we can covet a bit. That might be what it looks like for us to covet our neighbor's ox. How about his donkey? Again, something we probably don't struggle with, but what did they use donkeys for? Transportation. Do you struggle with coveting your neighbor's car or his bike, motorcycle, whatever it might be? Isn't it interesting that just to get all the bases covered, he says, or anything that is your neighbor's. Let's just add everything to the list. So if you think about at one level, and we're going to take it deeper in just a moment, but at one level, according to this commandment, we covet what we see. We covet things that are visible to us. The neighbor's house, the neighbor's servants, the neighbor's animals, anything that's the neighbor's. It's right there. It's for us to see. We covet what we see. So one of the practical applications is we have to be careful with our eyes, don't we? We have to be careful what we're looking at. And I think the day and age that we live in, it's more and more difficult because of technology. Don't we see more things now than we used to be able to see because of television, because of social media? And I'm not against those technologies at all. None of those things in and of themselves are bad. They're all neutral. They can be used for bad, they can be used for good. So this is not a rant on technology or social media in any way. I'm just trying to prod your thinking. I'm trying to help you to have some conversations about this around the dinner table. For those of you that are old enough to remember Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, one of the aspects of that show was when Mr. Rogers would ride the little trolley. Remember when he would ride the trolley and where they would go? Where would they go? To the neighborhood of make-believe. This section wins the prize. Do you remember the neighborhood of make-believe on Mr. Rogers? To some extent, and again, this is not a rant, I'm just trying to get you to think. To some extent, social media is the neighborhood of make-believe. Some of what we see on social media, some of what we see in the pictures and things that people post, isn't reality. What you often see is somebody's best. And when you see somebody's best, we're more prone to covet what we're seeing. People don't post every meal that they eat. They post their best meals or their favorite meals. They don't post when they wake up in the morning and what they look like when they get out of bed. They post when they're all gussied up for something. Again, it's not wrong to do that. My sister posted pictures of us at my graduation ceremony a couple weeks ago. Nothing wrong with doing that. You just have to be reminded that you're seeing people at their best. So from that extent, it is the neighborhood of make-believe. Again, nothing wrong with it, but just think about what you're seeing, and it can help your heart if you're prone to look at somebody on social media and say, they have a better life than I do. Look at their kids. Their kids must behave that way all the time. You're seeing them at their best. Don't forget that. So we have to be careful what we see, because we covet what we see. And sometimes what we see is the neighborhood of make-believe. Coveting is a strong desire that leads to a preoccupation with something. It is a root sin that starts deep down in us and leads to other sins. Robertson McQuilkin, longtime president of Columbia International University, passed away last week, and he defined covetousness this way. He says, to covet is to seek for something, someone, some position, some recognition, or some pleasure not in the will of God. I like that, because he's saying not all pleasure is wrong. Pleasure outside of the will of God is what's wrong. The other reason I like this definition is because he takes covetousness to a deeper level. Sometimes we think that we covet only physical things, but he says, no, you can covet somebody else's position. You can covet their power. You can covet their reputation. You can covet the recognition that they're receiving that you think you should be receiving. We can covet pleasure. So this helps us to take it a little bit deeper and think about, we don't just covet physical things, but it's beyond that as well. And where we have to become careful is sometimes we think, oh, it's just an internal sin. It's just something that I covet, and I wish I had this, and I wish I had a better that, and I wish I had this, and it really doesn't affect anything else. And the Bible makes it clear that over time, covetousness begins to erode relationships. The brother of our Lord Jesus, James, his brother, says this: you covet and you cannot obtain. You have a preoccupation or a strong desire with something or someone or whatever it might be. You covet, you can't obtain, so you do what? You fight and you quarrel. And it begins to erode the relationships that are there. Something else for you to think about when it comes to this area of what's going on in our hearts and what's going on in the things that we could potentially covet. And again, I'm not going to answer all the questions for you. Part of what I try to do in preaching and teaching is to spur on further thinking and to spur on further conversation. So here's a conversation that maybe you want to have in your small group or over lunchtime or whatever it might be. We think of coveting physical things. We think of coveting reputation and power and pleasure and some of those more abstract type things. I wonder if we covet time. Do some of you struggle with coveting time? You know that busy is the new fine. It used to be when you ask somebody how they're doing, they would say, oh, I'm fine. Things are fine. Now you ask somebody how they're doing, I'm pretty busy. Got a lot going on. Things are busy right now. Got this going on. The kids are doing this and that and whatever. Busy is the new fine. Sometimes I wonder if we covet and we wish we had more than the 168 hours a week that God has given to each of us. Isn't it interesting? Maybe you've never thought about this. If I were to go around the room and you were to list all the different possessions that you have and that you're responsible for, everybody's list would be very different. But if I would go around and say, how many hours a week do you have? Everybody's answer would be the same. So we don't covet the fact that somebody else has more time than we do. We all have the same number of hours a week. But I wonder if we covet other people's schedules. I wonder if we covet the fact that part of the reason we covet is because we want to kind of keep up with what everybody else is doing, so life becomes busy and full. And we say, I just wish I could pull back. I just wish I could slow down. Here's a verse to think about. Maybe you've never seen this before, but it's buried in a great Psalm of David in the Old Testament. Psalm 139, verse 16 says this: your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them. And if you don't read that carefully, they say, what is he talking about? What has been written in his book? Every one of what has been written in your book? And he's going to give the answer with what's coming. What's written in his book about you and me? The days that were formed for me. The days that were formed for you. For you as an individual person, God formed days for you. Doesn't just say that he formed days in general. He formed days for you. You have a stewardship of the hours that he's given you. You have a stewardship of the days that he has assigned to you. All of our days might be different. All of us are going to live a different number of days. But he has written down and formed days for you. You need to be thinking about the stage of life that you're in, the responsibilities that you have, the work that God has given you to do, and be faithful with those 168 hours per week. Don't covet somebody else's time, but say, God has formed the days for me. Am I making the most of them, and am I being a good steward of them? I don't think I have to probe any further today to help us to realize that we all can struggle with covetousness. It's something that's there inside of us. I don't think I have to keep convincing you that it's there. So what I'd like to do in the last few moments is say, what's a possible way to address my heart? What's a way that I can guard my heart so that I don't covet? Here's a couple thoughts for us. I think one of the solutions to a coveting heart is found in generosity. Back on February 21st, I give you the date in case some of you want to go back and listen to it. I preached an entire message just on the subject of generosity. In that message, I challenged us and I talked about in what comes into our lives, we want a generous person thinks like a manager, not an owner. A generous person realizes that they don't own anything that God has given to us. We're just managers of it. Have you thought about the fact that God has not designed and created us to be consumers? The world that we live in screams at us to consume, consume, consume. You need this, you need that. You'll be more happy if you just buy this and upgrade to this version. And you need the latest and greatest this, that, and whatever else. The world screams that we should be consumers. It's a lie. Nothing wrong with things, nothing wrong with material possessions, but we are not meant to live as consumers. We're meant to live as stewards and managers of what God has given to us. We should think of ourselves not as owners, but we should think of ourselves as conduit, or we should think of ourselves as a channel that God wants to flow through. What does conduit do when water is flowing through it? It helps water to get from one place to the other. Think of conduit when it comes to electricity. What does conduit tubing do? It provides a way for the wires to run through it so that electricity can run through it to get from one point to the other. You and I are channels in the hands of God. That God has blessed us and brought things into our lives to channel them through us, to be conduits so they can come through us and into the lives of others. Bless us so that we can be a blessing to others. It's really the theme of all of Scripture. We're not consumers, we're conduits and channels that God wants to work through. And when we think about life from that perspective, it allows us to become more generous. How do we develop that generosity? Gratitude leads to generosity. Gratitude leads us to be more generous as people. There's lots I could say here, but I'm going to save it and say it next week. Next Sunday on Father's Day, I'm going to preach a whole message on expressing gratitude. It's not enough to just feel gratitude in our heart, but we need to express it. Dads, I know sometimes you can feel a bit of trepidation in coming to church on Father's Day because you feel like on Mother's Day, the preacher just stands up and we honor moms and moms are so great. And then Father's Day, you show up and the pastor preaches at you and beats you over the head and says, what a terrible job that you're doing. I'm not going to do that next week. Show up next week. I'm going to preach a message on gratitude that's not just for dads, but I hope it's going to be a great, great encouragement. And I think you might think about gratitude a little bit differently after next week's message. So I hope you'll be back next week for Father's Day, where we'll talk more about gratitude. Gratitude leads to generosity, but how do we become grateful people? It all begins with contentment. Contentment. If there is contentment and gratitude and generosity in our hearts, there's not a whole lot of room left to covet. If we are living a life of contentment and gratitude and generosity, you're going to be others-centered and others-focused, and you're not going to have time to covet the things that you don't have or to covet the things that you wish you had. You say, I need more contentment in my life and heart. Help me to know how to be more content. Here's 2 thoughts for you to wrestle with. In Philippians chapter 4, Paul's describing, and he says, I know what it means to have very little, and I know what it means to have a lot. Some of us say, I know what it's like to be content when I have a lot in my life. But we assume that we have to learn to be content when we have very little. Paul says, no. I've learned in either situation, whether I have a lot or whether I have a little, I've learned how to be content. Some of us, we were more content when we had less stuff than we do now. Sometimes a discontentment comes the more stuff that we have. Look what Paul says in Philippians chapter 4. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. What does that tell you and me? That tells me that contentment is something that we learn. So for those of you that say, I'm not a content person, you should say, well, that's only natural that I'm not content. The natural disposition of the human heart is not to be content. So don't think there's something odd and strange about you if you're not content. Paul says, I had to learn to be content. All of us can learn to be content. It's not something that just happens naturally. Oh, look at that person. They're just such a content person. God, they just must have been born that way. No. It's not a natural disposition. It's something that we have to learn. How do we learn how to do it? The writer of Hebrews again helps us. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. Keep your life free from money. That's the way to be content. I'm glad some heads looked up. Is that what it says? No. Keep your life free from the love of money. Money's not wrong. Money's not evil. It's not wrong to be rich. But keep your life free from love of money, and instead of loving money, be content with what you have. Now don't miss this connection. For he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Do you see how that connects to contentment? You can be content with what you have because your contentment is not found in material things. Your contentment should be found and grounded in your relationship with your Heavenly Father, who will never leave you nor forsake you. Some of us, we ride the waves of the circumstances of our life, and our contentment is based on what's happening circumstantially. When we're on the top of the wave and everything's going great and the job is good and the kids are getting along and everything's great with the in-laws and whatever, yeah, we're as content as can be. But as soon as the circumstances of life come crashing down, God, where did you go? What happened to you? Why am I no longer content? And we ride those waves of the circumstances of life. And Paul says, and the writer of Hebrews says, no. You can learn to be content in whatever is happening in your life, because your contentment is founded and grounded and rooted in your relationship with God, and He will never leave you nor forsake you. Ponder that truth. Contentment comes from that fact and from that understanding. The deepest longings of our souls will never be found and satisfied in the things that we consume. The deepest longings of our souls will be found in our relationship with our Heavenly Father. This is not a message against technology. It's not a message against social media. It's not a message against money. It's not a message against material possessions. All of those have their place and they're fine, unless you're trying to find your ultimate contentment in those instead of finding it in God. Contentment leads to gratitude, leads to generosity. That's the way that we buckle up our hearts. That's the way that we guard our hearts, and it doesn't leave a whole lot of room to covet. You shall not covet. Guard your heart. If I were to summarize the 10 Commandments, I think that's a significant enough one that I'd put it in its own category. Here would be my summary. The 10 Commandments tell us to do this. Honor God, first 4, first 5. Honor others, 6 through 9. Guard your heart. Isn't that what you want? Isn't that what you want for your kids? Don't you wish your boss would live that way? Don't you wish your employees would live that way? Don't you wish the people in this country would live that way? Isn't this really what we want? To honor God, to honor others, and to guard our hearts. And you know what happens when we do that? Freedom rules, doesn't it? Freedom rules in our lives and our hearts when we're honoring God, honoring others, and we're guarding our hearts. But you know why we do that? We do that not to get in with God. We do that because we're already in. And we do that because we're living a life, if we've put our faith and trust in the Lord Jesus Christ, we do that because out of gratitude, not out of guilt. So I just have to end this way to make this, I don't know how to make it any more clear other than saying it this way. If you sat through this series, or maybe it's your first time through the doors at Calvary Church, and there's still something inside of you that says, I've got to follow the rules, I've got to keep the commandments, and when I keep the commandments, then God will be pleased with me. Don't walk out of here saying, I'm going to try harder to keep those commandments. I'm going to make sure that I do my best to keep those commandments, and I know that I'm going to fall short, but I hope that God grades on a curve like my high school English teacher, and maybe he'll someday accept me. Here's what you have to understand about the law, and you have to understand about the commandments. Paul says it, this is to me is the best way it could possibly, in the most direct way it could be said. Romans chapter 3, verse 20. For by works of the law, no human being will be justified in his sight. You can't keep the commandments and somehow think that then God will be pleased and accept you into a relationship with him. Are the commandments important? Should we keep the commandments? Should we live by the Spirit and fruit of the Spirit? Absolutely. But not out of guilt to get in with God. We do it out of gratitude because if we've put our faith and trust in the Lord Jesus Christ, it's now him working in and through us. And because he keeps the law and we can't, he is doing that work and enables us to do that, and it keeps us free from the consequences of sin. Don't walk away from this series and say, I just have to try harder and maybe God will accept me. You will never be justified. You'll never be made right. You'll never gain a right standing with God through the works of the law. If anything, it's just the opposite. Since through the law comes the knowledge of sin. Paul says in Romans 7, read Romans 7, it's as if the law awakens sin in me and I sin even more now that I know what it is. The law tells us that we're sinners. It tells us we can't keep the law. But the glorious message, the news of the gospel, is that God provided a way. And he sent Jesus Christ, who perfectly fulfills the law, which allows him to be the perfect sacrifice for my sin and for your sin and for all of the lawbreakers, which is every single one of us. Died on the cross, rose again, and God says, just put your faith and trust in Jesus. Stop trying to trust in your good works. Stop trying to trust in your church attendance and your good deeds. No, trust in Jesus. And then live and keep the law and the commandments out of gratitude, not out of guilt. But freedom can only rule in your life if it begins with a relationship with Jesus Christ. The relationship and the freedom that we find in God doesn't begin with the law. It begins with Jesus and what he has accomplished for us. I hope that each and every one of you can walk out of this room today and say, I've put my faith and my trust in the Lord Jesus Christ. I can't keep the law. He kept it for me. My faith and my trust, I'm leaning on him, not leaning on myself. And when we do that and we live a life out of gratitude and we honor God and we honor others and we guard our heart, it's a life of freedom that's beyond comprehension. What a joy it is to be a follower of Jesus Christ. What a joy it is to open up his word and engage with it and read it and live according to it. And freedom truly can rule when we live that way. Let me pray. Father, our desire is that each one, my desire is that each one in this room, each one hearing my voice over the radio, whatever it might be, that they would know and have a confidence that they are rightly related to you, not because they keep the rules, not because they keep the law, not because they're patting themselves on the back with what they've done, but they are rightly related to you because they have surrendered themselves to Jesus. They recognize that they are a sinner, that they need your grace and your forgiveness, and they're putting their faith and trust in you and you alone. When we do that, we're then indwelt with the Spirit that then equips us and enables us to live according to the way that you want us to live. And when we do that, freedom truly can rule in our lives. Thank you for your word. Thank you for the truthfulness of it. Thank you for the freedom that this series has brought as we've really unpacked these commandments and these rules. And may we be a people that live according to what you have prepared and designed for us in Christ as we're pursuing a life in your Son. And it's in his name that we pray. Amen. If you're putting your faith and your trust in Jesus Christ for the first time, I would love to connect with you. You can take that card in the back of the pew, fill it out, check on there that you're beginning a relationship with Jesus Christ, bring it down, take it to the connection centers. Ben and Allison will be down front here. Then they're going to go and connect with others at lunch. Reminder of the welcome gathering. Lunch is served. Grab a keychain on your way out. We'll see you next week for Father's Day. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. God bless you all.